So, a few housekeeping matters that we should attend to. First of all, let me start this debate by defining some key terms which are pivotal to the success of this debate. The first of all being the word youth. What are youth in the context of Zimbabwe? You find out that when we talk about youth, we're talking about people within the ages of 18 to 35 who are active in the economy of Zimbabwe. Secondly, what are these decision-making bodies? We're talking about the legislative arm of government, basically referring to parliament and those who make major decisions regarding the economy. Secondly, what is a green economy for the purpose of this debate? We're talking about a better economy as in the sense of greener pastures, where everyone and every place is involved in the decision-making that affect our economy. So, to do justice to this motion, we're going to, first of all, examine the current status quo and see how things look like in the current world. First of all, you'll find out that according to the latest census, we've got 67% of the population of Zimbabwe being composed of youth in the ages 18 to 35, whilst the rest, which is the 23%, represents the elderly and the young dependents. At the same time, you also find out that when we look at the parliamentary seats, we have got fewer youth in the parliament, yet they make up the majority of our population. How is this a problem? Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to prove this in our speech, and we'll prove to you why the involvement of this majority youth can lead to a green economy. So our burden is to prove that the decisions that are made in Parliament by these decision-making bodies are not an accurate representation of what is happening in the current status quo, since we have alluded to the fact that youth, they comprise 67% of our population. So, how then do we come to the belief that youth representation in these decision-making bodies can lead to a successful transition to a green economy? Straight into our case. First of all, you find out that the youth, they form the backbone of our economy. Essentially, we're simply saying that they are the laborers, they are the ones who are responsible for creating wealth for the country. They are the active part of our economy. So for that reason, you find out that for us to progress as a country to a green economy, we need to involve those laborers, those that are working tirelessly for this country, those that are energetic, that are giving their all to ensure that this country progresses. So if we have an underrepresentation, this simply means that it does not tally with what we have in the current status quo. And at the end of the day, for us to achieve this green economy, we have to include our youth. Secondly, you find out that the world is constantly evolving and there are emerging technologies. Now, how is it that involvement of this youth is going to increase and move us in the right way towards a green economy? You find out that youth, they are very adaptable and they respond well to these emerging technologies. What are we talking about? Let's talk about the advent of AI and so on. It's the youth that are active and they're able to respond well and use this AI to drive our economy to a green economy as is requested by our motion. So you find out that at the end of the day, because these youth are able to adapt and quickly respond and quickly grasp and utilize these emerging technologies, it simply tells us that if we represent them well in these decision-making bodies, it simply means they are going to be able to make decisions that represent the contemporary and futuristic approach that we need to take as a country for us to reach a green economy. So, thirdly, you also find out that it will, by involving our youth in these decision-making bodies, it will fulfill the foundations of democracy which our country hinges on. And at the end of the day, you find out that we will fulfill the issue of representing each and every one and each and every place, as we have alluded to you that the youth since they are the majority of our population, they give us a better representation of the decisions that society requires. We also should not neglect the fact that the future is in the hands of the youth and therefore they should be included in these decision-making bodies. Now, our opposing bench might come and try to talk about the issue of youth not.
Firstly, before we start, shout out to all the very beautiful ladies that I'm seeing today. You guys look lovely. Let's have a very fun debate. You guys look really stunning, almost as stunning as my date. But yeah, anyway, let's look at this debate in 3, 2, 1. Panel, let's understand why exactly there is a need for youth representation in this debate, right? And in their characterization of this motion, they fail to understand that youth representation is now equated to very crucial in the process of making decisions, right? And us as a bench, we're already initially refuting that because of so many fundamentalized principles that already oversee the idea of just saying that let's have this person here because they fit a certain age range. How exactly are we saying that, right? In our stance, we're saying that we value a world in which decisions that are made are particularly accurate, right, and particularly functional in their making. And then therefore, we argue, well, we want a world where we have real-world practical decisions. So then therefore, when we look at the arbitrary metric of just saying that a decision is inherently right because they included someone who was between a particular age range, right? And they use that as the criteria for picking, right? We lose out on so many things, like their inherent knowledge on particular topics, right? We lose out on so many things, like their consistency with these right decisions. We lose out on so many things, like their active track record, right? So now when we look at these particular things, it is wrong for us to lose this final because we engage with on the importance of experience, right? Because when you look at it symmetrically in framing, right, their word says that and if a green economy shall be present and a green economy is particularly right, Tony, I'll take you. Wait, where are you talking? Yeah, I'll take you in a bit. So let's understand that a green economy is particularly important, right? And we need to achieve this idea. So now, looking at both of our words that we're presenting, we're saying that on their world, they are likely to get a functioning green economy based on the extension that they're probably going to bring on the idea of how young people are initially innovative and adapt to things faster, right? But we're saying on our world, we're more likely to have more pragmatic decisions that are already made. So looking at the value judgment aspect of this, and this house believes that we need to assess whether or not experience supersedes the idea of innovation. Tabo, speak. Then, okay, you can try.
Right. So can you agree that to get into parliament, whether you are youth or whatsoever, you get there because of your capabilities and by merit? You are voted there because of those reasons.
I love how you bring that. Yes, I concede to that particular notion. Why do I concede to that particular notion? Because we're looking at criteria that supersede the idea of youth, that your side of the debate is now saying is crucial for being put in these particular ideas, is crucial for them to have been considered in these particular debates, right? So now, let's understand this, right? As opposition's job, it's our job to necessarily look at this debate from a very top-down view. And we say that once these things that are valued are things like knowledge and real-world knowledge on on particular decisions that are required for a fully functional economy. What does this look like? It looks like people who understand the very dynamic and nuanced ideas of building an economy. Things like the art of economics in and of itself, the art of principles of accounting, and all of these particular things, right? So, Tom, sit down and Tony. So, when we now look at these things, right, we're saying we want someone who has particularly gone through these things and developed a real world knowledge, not one that is based on books, not one that's based on written down principles. We want one that has particularly worked, right? So now, where are we more likely to see this, right? We're more likely to see this okay, fine.
This debate on the principle of pragmatic things and things that are symmetrical.
The principle that lies behind this, right, is the principle that supports an idea of experience over innovation, right? So now, when we say that experience is the primary mandate, is the primary thing that we will be looking for instead of youth representation, what are we saying? That look at the arguments of
my case and then prove that whatever is being brought by side of the opposition is a misfit in today's debate, and also prove why side OG takes this debate on. So, what do we actually bring to you in this current world? We tell you that we have a growing population of the youth which is going to be the future. We are not neglecting that. We should work in hand with the old, as Prime Ministers I already alluded that we really need these guys for advice. It's not equivalent to operate in decision making alone, which is something that they fail also to acknowledge that we really need the guidance of these guys. They will help shape us the future where we are going to be existing. What do they advocate as a house from or perspective, right? Which makes them non and void right in this debate. Number one, they come and talk about the experience which the old has, right? We are not running away from the fact that the old actually have the skills. Actually, yes, the experience is the skills, right? But what we are running away from is the aspect of time and currents when we tell you that these guys, they are already dying, right? What do they really need to do? They really need to shape this youth into better citizens for the future according to SDG goals. What do SDG goals advocate for? They advocate for a sustainable future panel, which is something that they neglect in their own mode of analysis in trying to paint the fallacy or a fantasy to say that the youth, they are not important in decision making. So what does the panel Gomo comes and tell you? Gomo comes and tell you the aspect of democracy, the rule of participation, which they actually neglect, right, panel. And we come and tell you as OG that inclusivity is necessary. Why? Because a society is not built by one party within a society, let's say men on their own. We actually need to include everyone in decision making. Why? Because the decisions that which are made, they will directly affect these youth, which is going to be problematic, right, panel. That's why we come and advocate that youth on their own. We are not running away that they challenge the current status quo to say that already representation is already there. But the question that we have from OG's perspective, right, is it enough, which is something that is problematic, right? It is not enough. When you want to craft a bill into law, you have 50 elderly people against 3 youth, which is the system is rigged. The system does not work, which is something that is problematic. That's why we are advocating for a change. That's why we are saying, panel, inclusivity is a necessary one. We are not running away from the fact that these elders, right, they help us in shaping the future, right? What we are saying that let them guide us. So what do we actually bring aside open government? Number one, we come and tell you the aspect of enforced decision. Already we have told you that the youth population is growing in numbers with only 23% in Zimbabwe. So it means that if these guys are making decisions, they are making decisions which are baseless because they do not understand the things that are affecting the youth, which means that already the future is a doom because they don't really know the real things that are affecting this youth, which is actually problematic in their own world of analysis. And also, what do we actually come and tell you? That in order to shape the society, what do we really need? We really need the youth because the youth, they are the drive, they are the backbone to shape, to ensure that the future on its own makes sense, right? We are not running away. We need from the fact that we really need these guys, right? But we really need to also include these youth so that they start to learn, so that they start to process, so that they can figure out to answer problems regarding the future pattern. What we are taking as OOG is the futuristic approach, right? What do we actually find from opening, which is actually problematic, right? They come and tell us that the representation that is already there, they come and paint it as if these youth don't deserve this position, which is actually problematic. Why? There is the right to vote. We are saying that these youth, they are being selected because of merit, of capabilities. They deserve to be in this position, which is something that they come and paint a picture and dramatize and lie before you judges. Consider that.
I'll take you next.
So, let me allude to you one of the policies that is being crafted by the Zimbabwean economy, right? The Zimbabwean mantra of 2025. What does it advocate for? Leaving no one behind. Panel. This is what we are advocating for at the end of the day. Let us not leave anyone behind, right? Which is something that they opening opposition and closing opposition will come and go much more. Which actually makes them government with their own, still a chance to win this panel. So what do we actually bring to the table, right? And tell you why we to relieve you that at OG's perspective, we've done justice to the current status quo, and we've managed also to justify why youth on their own should be involved in decision making. Number one, we come and tell you that if these youth are continuously suppressed, right, we are going to have wars, rebellious wars, because they're going to this is going to be a massacre. Because there are large numbers that these elderly people, which is going to be problematic, which is something that they also neglect, that these youth, they're actually growing in numbers, as we do really feel that at the end of the day, the side that leads this debate, the side coach, what? We are able to come and tell you one of the policies that Zimbabwe is currently working on, Zimbabwe Mantra 2025, leaving no one behind. And we also come and tell you about the global policies that are already implemented, the aspect of SDG goal number 13, that creating a sustainable future with inclusivity of the youth. Why? Because decisions that are being made directly affect their life. So finally, with this, we do really feel the rest of it.
I would love to remind the House that please be quiet when the speaker is speaking on the podium. When you guys are whispering at the back and there's a lot of you whispering, it creates commotion for us as the panel. So please let us be wary of that. Without further ado, let us welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition to the podium. Here.
Okay, so speech in 5, 4, 3, 2. So panel, it's very imperative of us today to realize what this motion is truly asking for and the basis of what cruciality really means at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. My leader of opposition comes and tells you that experience can help in decision making. Experience can help in decisions in new but similar environments, ladies and gentlemen. What are these new environments and what are the similar environments that we're talking about in today's debate? We feel like in current status quo, the idea of us acknowledging green economy is something that is inherently good for the society, ladies and gentlemen. And how do we choose to engage on what has been brought by government side, ladies and gentlemen? We tell them that it's inherently okay for the youth to be directly engaged within the current status quo, that being the parliament that we mentioned about. But we're telling you that the cruciality of them having to make decisions, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't necessarily fall on them having the know-how, but actually valuing consistency and actually valuing things like experience, ladies and gentlemen. They come in and tell us that as a preemptive, us having the basis of someone having experience doesn't really matter in today's debate. But we're telling you, ladies and gentlemen, in pragmatical examples, ladies and gentlemen, we really need to look at the transition of how of the transitional aspect of us coming from this old environment to this new environment that we're already trying to solve, ladies and gentlemen. Let's look at pragmatic example, ladies and gentlemen, outside of the scope of what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. We already value the presence of youth in today's society, ladies and gentlemen. This is the reason why you, as the camp members, also allowed other institutional youth to be panelists, to be chairs at the end of the day. But your presence as the camp is where we are truly basing this debate on. Your presence as the camp right now, as you are judging us, also having the youth within the table, is something that we feel like should be crucially valued, and this is something that we really try to take in today's debate. For another example is on how students, after they come out of school, they directly go for attachment, and within that attachment spectrum, they have someone who's mentoring them. There's someone who's supervising them. That's the know-how that we're talking about, and that's how we feel like these the governing bodies that are already in existence have the practicality and the practicality of them having this experience that has been garnered over time, compared to someone who's freshly come out of college, having to make crucial decisions that can very impact the existence of the world within the future. This is something that we really need to talk about. So what do we get from my leader of opposition? We come here and tell that symmetrically we have agreed on both sides, and this is something that we're trying to cater for. So for us to consider the youth making this crucially the decision, doesn't necessarily fall on them having being fresh out of college, having flying colors and stuff like that. But we truly value things like real world experience. We truly value you as camp members on the experience that you've garnered. That's why we want you in today's debate. That's why you are sitting there and you're paneling and you are the chair, ladies and gentlemen. We wouldn't want someone who's inexperienced to debate, to be an adjudicator at the end of the day. This is why we're facing problems like House speakers were inherently complaining on how they were barely adjudicated, ladies and gentlemen. So this is something that we really need to take into account, and this is something that is already proved within current status quo, ladies and gentlemen. And how do we prove so, ladies and gentlemen? They bring in a point on how the youth are adaptive and have the idea of knowing how to use technology. But take a look at this. The children that they are talking about, they were taught by someone who already had the knowledge of using this. Someone who inherently built this system, the structure that they are telling the youth are adaptable in it. And so see how we managed to flip this and work on our side at the end of the day. Them having gathering this knowledge, it doesn't primarily come from them knowing how, but from someone who has experience, who has taught them how to use this. This is the cruciality aspect that we're trying to advocate for. This is why we're telling you that in as much as youth are already, they've come and paint the picture of youth are not directly engaged within the current status quo. But they're indifferent. They say that the member of parliament are from 1835. We feel like we already have these people within parliament, but the aspect of them actually have to make key, crucial decisions doesn't necessarily have to be on the aspect that they have the knowledge, but it's truly valuing consistency within the idea of having experience. And how to necessarily track this measurement. We believe that you as CAP have a track record showing you why your experiences has to be valued at the end of the day. This is something that we really need to take into accountability, ladies and gentlemen. And at the end of the day, the debate doesn't solely focus on how the youth are not being advocated for or represented. They're already represented, ladies and gentlemen. We take this into accountability, but the aspect of them being represented means that a higher governing body has already seen the talented aspect that they have, hence why they should be involved. But without them, the higher being there and truly focusing and acknowledging them, they wouldn't be advocated for in the first place. Hence, someone who inherently knows something much better and experiences real world problems is someone that I would truly go and ask for help at the end of the day. You wouldn't want to be adjudicated by someone you just met from Mutare Polytechnic. But if you have someone who has a CV, someone who has a track record showing you that they come coming straight from South Africa, they have this on their CV, they have this on their table. That's the very pragmatic choice that you need to take at the end of the day. So, And creating environment is something that we neutralize it. And creating environment is only successful on the basis of the transition of being good and being promoted by the experience that these people have every day. We do not want something that's going to be a pursuit into getting at the end of the day. We feel like the transition should be fastest, the fastest or the expedition of this transition is something that we currently need to set a school, and someone who inherently has much better experience.
Shout out to all the sponsors, to all the guests of honors here to this court. Thank you for our sponsoring space. Lastly, not least, shout out to the best debater that the game gave me, Tabo. This final was a good. Okay, alright. Alright. 5, 4, 3. Madam Chair, there's something that you need to understand about this debate. The whole reason why we've got so esteemed guests of honors who, by with no offense, are over the age of 40 is so that they can come in here thought-provoking ideas that they're going to take and implement to those places that they go. We think that integration is particularly important. That's the whole reason why they come in themselves. This is something that they don't touch on. This is something where they feel the debate in themselves. I think there are major questions that they don't ask, that they don't interrogate. We show you how we do this in sophisticated extensions. We think that on its own is worth debate winning in the simple clause. But on account of the principle, let's just revert their side and just deal with them as fast as possible. Panel, we tell you that this is a principle motion, and so we think principally that is what you want to get justified in the first place. We think that is what you have to come. Panel, they can't say their principle is based on experience, but listen to how Wokosi contradicts themselves. It tells you that we would rather not have someone who is going to spend 20 years learning economics. How are they going to learn that? How are they going to get experience if they spend 20 years in school learning that particular economics? We think there's no justification why that is unacceptable. But secondly, panel, they also come here and tell us that, you know, our principle is based on experience. How then is it based on experience when you want these youth to be excluded from these decision makings, to the instance to which they see how these decisions are making, to the instance to which they see how they advise? Notice then panel also when they come and tell us about scrutiny, we flip scrutiny to favor our side of the house. Check, these ideas are not ideas that are based on irrationality. These are ideas that are scrutinized by these people, by elderly advice. This is to say that the people like the guest of honors will advise you and tell us that, no, my sons and daughters, we acknowledge your ideas, they're perfect, but let's run them with things like that. That is where their experience comes from. We think this is particularly important. We think because they fail to realize that they lose on account of the knowledge. I'll take it the 4th minute. Right, but let's ask the questions that we feel like we needed to get from, like, or open the market that we didn't get. Panel 1, they have a perfect definition of what the youth is. We acknowledge that. We acknowledge the age, like the age allocation. But secondly, we think a youth constitutes things like progressive development analysis. We think these are people who've got fresh minds. We think these are people who've got thought-provoking ideas that profile the relation with how they are relating with the times. This is to say how adaptation looks like, how adoption looks like. So we think those things are particularly important. But the other thing that we feel like they forget on opening up is asking the question of what then does cruciality particularly constitute. We think one, it's significant. We think second of all, it's like it's something that is an imperative. Why then, on our side of the house, do we say that it is so crucial, it is so emergent, it is so urgent that youth cognitives and youth ideas are particularly needed within the process of decision-making people? Notice then, panel, how we tell you that youth representation, which is something that we don't get from their side of the house, are things like youth groups, are things like youth for like economic development, like the youth for ED in Zimbabwe. Those are things that we particularly prioritize. So we tell you that these opinions are particularly scrutinized. This is to say that they are evaluated, their importance and their significance. And if that is justified, this is where you see those ideas particularly being profiled into within the confines of, you know, within the confines of the system in current status quo. This looks like how the youth who created the encryption code or the hex code so that examination won't be cheated. We think that is particularly important in the process. But panel, we will tell you about what successful transition particularly looks like. This is to say that it looks like how these youths are actually going to know what governance looks like. They're going to know the government making policies, the government decisions. So they are learning from seeing. This is a situation whereby you are learning from the good that your parent does. So,
panel, understand that we live in a system of dictatorship. A system that is capitalistic, where governments pursue their own interests while suppressing groups that actually try to try for self-determination at the end of the day. How do we actually think that when there are groups that are rising to challenge that sort of power and claim positions just because they feel that it is justified to do so in principle, they're most likely fail. What is the case that OG runs? So OG, they talk about inclusivity. We think we acknowledge the importance of inclusivity. But how does inclusivity at the end of the day become a narrative and not something that actually manifests or self-actualizes? We tell you about the systematic and structural barriers that actually exist within society. To say one, if you say that youth are supposed to be represented, it's okay. We allude to that. We value the propositions that youth bring on the table at the end of the day. We value the innovativeness. We value the fresh ideas. But how are you most likely not going to get like the pragmatic benefits that they're talking about? Firstly, we think that governments at the end of the day, they hold power and like control over funding that this youth need at the end of the day, right? What does that look like? We think we have governments with old people that already feel entitled to their positions, right? Now when you try to push that narrative of like youth inclusion as something that is supposed to be like a violent thing to say, youth are supposed to claim these positions because they're justified to do so, we think governments are most likely to retaliate and they're not going to actually allow this youth to self-actualize, which makes it that cruciality they are talking about. We think it doesn't exist on their side. We think we don't get it on their side, and they don't achieve it, and becomes a narrative at the end of the day. And the pragmatic benefits that they're talking about, they actually like manifest into like exclusive harms on their side, right? Number two, we touch on like structural barriers that exist within the systems. Number one, we think government in itself is responsible for like enacting inclusive policies, right? So those are the kind of systems that we need to challenge at the end of the day. If we want like power to exist in society to say we want to capacitate youth, we want to capacitate like people who are going for like feminist ideas, or the other groups that are existing in society for inclusion, that are so desperate for inclusion, we think we need to confront the systems that are actually limiting those youth from doing so. Assuming that we actually take them at their best and we say that youth are going to be represented, what does that look like? We think it looks like now youth are confronting some of the bad things that government are doing. We think in that case, government can any day like strip the individual rights in terms of like how they hold power in the system to say we don't particularly think we need to represent the youth at the end of the day because they feel challenged by you. So we think those are the kind of things that we actually need at the end of the day. Alright. Secondly, we talk about like the systematic implementation and what it looks like. How are we most likely going to achieve these things they're talking about in terms of like attainment of a green economy at the end of the day? We think we already have structures and societies that have been doing these things in terms of like how they want to attain that green economy. What does it look like? We think those are the kind of systems we need to capacitate. Notice that this debate is not about whether or not we are not allowing youth to represent. We want them to represent, but we do not want to take that responsibility from structures that have already been doing so. We think we need to we think we need to maximize the visibility in those kind of companies to say if we have green companies that are pushing sustainability in terms of climate change and they are not doing so and they are being reckless, those are the kind of companies we need to hold accountable for that kind of attainment of a green economy, right? Though we are not saying that issues are not particularly important in this debate, right? So I'll give you an example of like how youth participation is dismally failed. We think when we look at modules like Education 5.0 and you say you want to accelerate youth participation, the reason why it doesn't come to self-actualize and like maximally develop age-based, we think it's because of the systems that I was talking about in terms of like how government in itself does not care about these things. We think government is the actor, the main actor in this debate in terms of like how they're supposed to capacitate youth, right? We think this is the reason why at the end of the day we do not like have innovation hubs in each and every university to make sure that the skills they are talking about in terms of like how people can be so innovative to make like technological things like a HESCO that ensures that the results for the university students are things that are accountable for. We think we don't get that in their world. They just talk about youth participation, but they don't show you how they accelerate it to a point where it is actually something that is beneficial or something that brings like pragmatic benefits. We think we don't get that on their side. So youth participation on their side becomes a narrative and not something that is very practical. What do we tell you? We think in status quo, we don't refuse the existence of youth participation. We told you about how these things have been existing in terms of like how youth have tried so much to accelerate their presence and exceed in positions of influence, but they don't get it at the end of the day. We feel like we still have that kind of narrative perpetuating, and 50 years from now, we will still talk about youth participation, and we don't see it coming into light, right? So what do we think we should actually do in terms of like acknowledging this youth and making sure that they actually go into those positions of power? We told you about one model where in principle, just because youth they feel like they have a claim to this position, they are most likely not to get them because there are structural barriers that exist within society itself. Then we told you we need to raise visibility in the structures that are already implementing those things, the structures that have been so reckless in terms of like the attainment of green economies in itself, right? And then we say when we raise visibility in those kind of institutions, in the long run, we also get to acknowledge the youth and integrate them into those positions. Why? We feel like expertise is something that is actually very important. When you have people who have been in this kind of industries or organizations that push for those kind of like green economy things, we feel like when you incorporate youth, they are most likely going to adapt compared to in their world where they just think that someone can just wake up from nowhere and they want to be included and they already have the expertise to that. We think when they actually learn under the influence of a person who has been there for 20 years, they're most likely going to get the knowledge they want, and that knowledge is going to actually turn into something that is very practical. So when they talk about principle, why do we think in principle will be there? They just talk about like how youth participation is something that is important and like how youth are justified in getting a claim to like positions of power in terms of like youth participation. And we told you that it's something that we want as something that is like self action.
We thank the opposition member and will now like to welcome the government whip to the podium.
One, two, can you hear me? Can you hear me? One, two. Right. Final round. Right. Now, panel. We have slightly confused and, I don't really have like the words to describe the side opposition in and of themselves, right? They come in, ladies and gentlemen, they have like a few strategic, errors that they bring about, ladies and gentlemen, right? They come in, ladies and gentlemen, and especially first of all, side opening up. They come in and talk about like how the decisions in and of themselves, ladies and gentlemen, right? And the functionality of decision making, right? How it is not like so accurate, right? But they fail to tell us, ladies and gentlemen, like what determines like the scale of the accuracy of the decision making, ladies and gentlemen, right? They come, ladies and gentlemen, and they talk about now how they want like to use old people, ladies and gentlemen, who have got like knowledge and experience and all of that, which we agree, ladies and gentlemen, right? But then, as the opening opposition, as the opening government came in, ladies and gentlemen, and told you, ladies and gentlemen, they told you that, yes, we agree, we want these old people to be there, but then we want them to be there, ladies and gentlemen, as advisors, ladies and gentlemen, right? Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give you an example of the airplane, ladies and gentlemen. The aeroplane was invented, ladies and gentlemen, rather, by the Wright brothers, ladies and gentlemen, right? right? But then to come here and say the Wright brothers in and of themselves built the 757 Boeing, ladies and gentlemen, is a complete fallacy, ladies and gentlemen. Someone else, ladies and gentlemen, invented that, and it wasn't the Wright brothers. So we're saying, let the old people advise us, ladies and gentlemen, and let the youth innovate. Simple and straightforward, ladies and gentlemen, right? Now they come and they draw like a comparison on why they prefer experience over innovation. I'm just going to come in and say, experience is basically old. Yes, it's good in all its forms, but then it's old, ladies and gentlemen, right? But then experience is old and it expires with the person in which it has, right? Innovation, as Tony came and told you, is constantly evolving, ladies and gentlemen. It is constantly growing. Innovation will never die as long as a human being still exists, ladies and gentlemen, right? They fail to come in and tell us why exactly is it not very crucial for us to include the youth, ladies and gentlemen, into this crucial decision making, right? And then they come and they give a ridiculous case of how CAP, ladies and gentlemen, is experienced in their debate track record, ladies and gentlemen, right? In order to justify their case. Yes, CAP is experienced, ladies and gentlemen, but then at some point in time, ladies and gentlemen, there were novices, ladies and gentlemen, right? But in taking them at their level base, right? CAP, ladies and gentlemen, is a bunch of youth who do not care less, ladies and gentlemen, about what a green economy is. They're focusing on relationships and all of that. Highly likely this motion was brought by the guest of honor in and of himself and this board of adults, ladies and gentlemen, right, who wanted to hear what us the youth actually think, ladies and gentlemen, right, which we think side opening opposition lose the case, ladies and gentlemen, not take it. Right, now we have like aside closing opposition, opposition that comes with a very problematic thing. They come in, ladies and gentlemen, and tell us that the government is oppressive, ladies and gentlemen, right? That there are systematic structures, ladies and gentlemen, that manipulate and make sure that the youth do not get what they want. This is where we find it to be very problematic. We have youth for economic development that are being facilitated by the very same government that they say is progressive, is oppressive, ladies and gentlemen. We've got old schemes, we've got youth investment schemes, ladies and gentlemen, that are being facilitated by this very same government, ladies and gentlemen, that they come in and they talk about. They also come in, ladies and gentlemen, and talk about the aspects of feminism and how this does not work. But then they do not come in, ladies and gentlemen, with the nuance of how this, ladies and gentlemen, of how their case contributes exactly to the green economy. Who calls please say the case.
Now, take your question and wait. Prove to us how youth are unique in and of themselves, other than innovation, because innovation is present with or without the advent of youth.
Right. So who was it just gave me a challenge on why I should prove that the youth are basically the right people for this job, right? First of all, we come in and basically tell you about the physical aspects of the youth in other words. Right. Youth are more innovative, as he mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, right? Youth are young, ladies and gentlemen, right? Youth are industrious, ladies and gentlemen. They come in and they tell you that 67% of the Zimbabwe economy, ladies and gentlemen, is being harbored, ladies and gentlemen, by the youth, ladies and gentlemen. So I don't really know and don't really get what your question, ladies and gentlemen. You're shooting yourself in the foot by asking us that, ladies and gentlemen, right? Now, side closing our opposition doesn't really comes in and tells us that as side government, we are running a narrative. Right? Now, what exactly is a narrative in and of itself? Right? A narrative is some form of an idea, ladies and gentlemen, that facilitates action in and of itself. Right? Now, they don't come in and tell us, ladies and gentlemen, what is so bad about a narrative, ladies and gentlemen. Every single thing, this whole building in and of itself was a narrative at some point in time, ladies and gentlemen. So we don't really get their case. Please try and say the case.
You talked about some radical government initiatives for the youth. Notice that these are things that for the youth that are already affiliated with those kind of governments. So the equal representation you're talking about just self-actualized.
Fine. But then, what you are inherently talking about, I am just simply stating what you said, right? The government in and of itself is oppressive according to your words, but then the very same government that you're initially talking about is providing all of these equal opportunities so that the youth in and of themselves, ladies and gentlemen, can succeed, right? Now, what does Tony come in, ladies and gentlemen, and tell you, right? My partner comes in and tells you about the progressive elements of the youth in and of themselves, right? The youth representation organizations that are already there in our government, ladies and gentlemen, that are taking us a step closer to achieving a green economy. He comes in and he tells you, ladies and gentlemen, what transition basically looks like, ladies and gentlemen, right? He tells you what the youth in and of themselves bring to the table, right? I challenge the CEO, ladies and gentlemen, to come with a better analogy, ladies and gentlemen, of how, maybe the youth have failed in our current society, with 67% of them, with the majority of them being in the country's population and being involved in the economy, right? He tells you about the pragmatic development, ladies and gentlemen, and the benefit thereof. And then, lastly, but not least, ladies and gentlemen, he comes in and emphasizes, ladies and gentlemen, this is emphasis that evolution, ladies and gentlemen, is constant. It will never change, ladies and gentlemen. Innovation in and of itself is always constant, ladies and gentlemen, and it will never change. Let the youth be included, ladies and gentlemen, into the green economy ideas, ladies and gentlemen, and the schemes, and you will see that we will reach this middle class economy, ladies and gentlemen, in less than 3 years. With this, I think.
We thank the government whip as we call forth the chief whip. May the rest of you guys please call on your friends to come back to the briefing area because 10 minutes after the Salam Awards will begin. So we need everybody back into this room. Other than that, chief whip, we welcome you to the front here.
Before I start, I was sitting in that corner, so if I'm too loud, just raise your hand and I'll try to be quiet. I'm thinking too much. Right? And secondly, I'm not really feeling well, just wanted to put that disclaimer, but for the love of the game, I'll just push through. Alright, so can I start? Start in 3, 2, 1. So, while we allude that while youth inclusion is important for democratic diversity, it is not a crucial factor in determining the success of a green economy. We believe that prioritizing expertise, institutional capacity, and systemic implementation is more central. So, fundamentally in this debate, we believe that the burden of proof of the government was to come here and tell us why is youth representation in decision-making board actually look like what you do not get. Two, from the opposition, we get a POI whereby they ask why is it uniquely crucial for a successful transition to a green economy, and then they talk about vain and shallow point of innovation and adaptability. Three, we believe that they should have come and explained what this successful transition of a green economy actually looks like at the end of the day. So, using a rebuttal analysis and weighing, I actually want to analyze the case and show you why it doesn't work. So, look, we actually understand when we look at time frame. We believe that at the end of the day, agency demand efficiency. So, at the end of the day, climate change and a sustainable green economy is time sensitive at the end of the day, and it's actually it's a problem that demands quick and unified action at the end of the day. 1. 2, we believe that broadening its representation too much may fragment responsibility and slow action and the slow response at the end of the day. So we believe that decision-making bodies already struggle with bureaucracy at the end of the day. So we believe that adding more layers of mandatory representation, especially with limited expertise at the end of the day, could delay essential policies that we need to actually successfully transition to a green economy. So understanding that glaciers in the Antarctica will not stop melting because we actually want to create reforms that include youth, right? 2, understanding that global warming will not stop because I want a position in power at the end of the day. We look at meritocracy and responsibility, right? We understand that decision making impacts entire companies and entire economies, and they should be made by the most qualified, not simply demographic inclusion. Right? We believe that people with expertise and necessary capabilities should be the ones that actually make these sustainable decisions that actually lead to a green economy at the end of the day.
that we actually want these people to be advisors at the end of the day, but we believe this will not work but because of the democratic imbalance that exists, because that means that at the end of the day, if you want them to be advisors, that means that they actually have to give them power, this power and this funding that they have, which we believe that this is something that does not exist and will not work and they will not do if history has taught us something at the end of the day. Then we talk about institution stability. We believe that overloading fragile and corrupt institutions with reforms actually demands, reform demands actually further weakens the further at the end of the day. So I believe that focus should be on strengthening systems before we actually expand at the end of the day. Right? So we believe that they actually come in and their main case is mainly on how they want to incorporate their views because some of their innovative in nature and they talk about adaptability. But we believe that this youth representation inclusion includes holding office. We believe that this is not a sustainable and fundamental argument for their crucial representation in decision-making boards and then so I believe that if they have they actually have these views and they actually adapt to, we believe that they should mostly focus on youth activism. We believe that those views are represented in youth activism. We look at South Africa, which is an example of a youth of successfully and actively engagement in activism for a green economy at the end of the day. Then we tell you that they should actually we believe that they should actually engage in youth forums to give their views at the end of the day. So I believe that it is not fundamental and substantiated to say that because they have a certain view, they should actually be included in government representation. Let them go to forums, let them do youth activism at the end of the day. We believe that that's not justified and fundamental at the end of the day. Let me tell you about, even if we talk about structural barriers, maybe actually comes and then let's say we allude that there's a crucial nature that actually exists whereby we need youth representation at the end of the day. And we say we take them at their base. We believe that government controls these funds and they have the power and they control the system at the end of the day. So we believe that inclusion looks like the government ceding power to young people at the end of the day. We believe that the government in history has taught us something. The government is not willing to let go of these funds and the power, and when we try to challenge the current status quo at the end of the day. So I believe that at the end of the day, this ideology becomes a narrative and idealistic in nature rather than pragmatically implemented, rather than pragmatic at the end of the day. Right? So we believe that they come in and they talk about how initiatives like Youth for ED actually has shown that youth representation actually works at the end of the day. But we believe that Youth for ED and this youth representation is for people that are only affiliated with the government, which is contradictory to their case of youth representation and equal representation. How do we have equal representation when only youth that are affiliated with the government are only the people that actually get this youth representation at the end of the day? Right? So what do you get from our side? Actually, from the government, we talk about how exactly we believe we should prioritize expertise. And we say that qualified and expert individuals should be the one that are in charge of making sustainable decisions that actually ensure a successful transition to a green economy at the end of the day. We believe that people who be in the field, once they have the necessary qualification, will be able to make sustainable decisions that actually that actually see the sustainable transition of to a green economy. Then we talk about how exactly we want to implement, focus on systemic implementation in institutional capacity. What does this look like? This looks like capacitating the current structures that actually exist to ensure that there's successful transition to a green economy. We believe this looks like enacted green economy policies. Why do we believe this looks like, for example, introducing carbon credits? These are point systems that actually measure carbon emissions of companies at the end of the day. So we believe that we believe that companies are incentivized to make profit. So I believe that if we include tax exemptions, they'll actually it will be inclusive. Then to talk about holding companies accountable that exacerbate climate change. What does this look like? This looks like extensifying projects and tax.
We thank the opposition rep and we will now like to officially close this debate. Thank you guys for your participation. Please before we begin with our ceremony as we begin the deliberation. Thank you.